good morning, and welcome to Rising. Happy day after election morning. I don't know what our official holiday designation is for that. We've got a lot of election results to recap. They were an exciting night for your people.
The inner workings of election day at a TV studio is always so fun. I think I need to document one time. It's like running,
zooming around here. It's like, get out of the way. You will be bulldozed by this lovely lady behind the camera right now.
It's always fun to watch. Yeah. Coming up on Rising, big nights for Democrats as they swept Republicans in last night's elections.
Plus, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is warning Democrats that the department may have to shut down airspace if a deal doesn't get done.
And we'll be discussing Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's appearance on The View. But first, Robby, good morning, and what's on your radar?
Let's get to it. The New York Times is weighing in on the rise of Nick Fuentes, a self-described white nationalist, racist anti-Semite, by making him look cool. What is going on? Now look, if you've missed my radars this week, here's a recap. For the past few mornings, I described the burgeoning conflict in conservative media and commentary between two warring factions. On one hand, you have traditional neoconservative, pro-Israel voices who are represented by figures like Ben Shapiro, Josh Hammer, Mark Levin, etc., versus non-interventionist and anti-Israel factions represented by the likes of Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith. Now, that conflict has become open war now that Shapiro and others have called on conservative media figures to disassociate from Carlson after he interviewed Nick Fuentes, the leader of this Groyper movement, which is not merely anti-interventionist, but also anti-Semitic and racist. Now, Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, may have to resign after defending Carlson and only weakly criticizing Fuentes. Staff of the conservative think tank are in open revolt, and some are demanding his ouster. Carlson, however, maintains this isn't really about anti-Semitism or racism or the other disturbing and fringe views of Fuentes. It's about what American foreign policy will look like after President Donald Trump is no longer the leader of the Republican Party. Here he was on Dave Smith's show responding to Ben Shapiro's campaign against him.
This is a fight over what happens after Donald Trump. What does the Republican Party look like? Does it actually adopt an America First foreign policy as promised 10 years ago? Or does it maintain its neoconservative posture, which is very unpopular with the public and has borne no fruit? I mean, it's been a disaster on every level for the United States for, since 9/11, at least. But what happens after Trump goes? And that's what this is about. That's why they're vesting the energy in this. That's what the rage is about, because they don't want to lose control of foreign policy. I just can't say that enough. It's about foreign policy. They don't care about domestic policy because they don't care about the United States, but they do care about the U.S. Treasury and the Pentagon, the projection of force on behalf of Israel.
There's something to that. For years, Trump has vowed to deliver an American-first foreign policy agenda that extracts the U.S. from burdensome foreign entanglements. Now, that doesn't mean turning our backs on our allies and refusing to engage with the rest of the world. It simply means prioritizing the domestic needs of the American people and disentangling the country from military inventions overseas that are endless, counterproductive, and contrary to our interests. I'm with Carlson and Smith on that. Now, at the same time, it doesn't do the non-interventionist cause much good to become primarily identified with the likes of Nick Fuentes, who thinks Hitler is cool and that women enjoy rape and that Jews are running society. Fuentes is toxic and will sabotage the America First agenda as assuredly as he is bent on sabotaging the conservative movement. For example, he does not support Trump, voted against him in 2024, and has said he would not back J.D. Vance for president because Vance is married to an Indian woman. I'm not calling for him to be canceled or deplatformed, mind you. I'm just calling on everyone who supports his views on non-interventionism to perhaps express some caution here. If you won't take my word for it, consider that the New York Times is now boosting Fuentes as the successor to Charlie Kirk, the recently assassinated conservative media figure who loathed Fuentes and worked to minimize his influence. Now, in a recent column, the Times wrote that Fuentes is becoming Kirk's successor. While the column itself is mostly a fine overview of all the conservative infighting, the image of Fuentes that accompanies the photo, which unfortunately we can't show here, actually makes him look cool. It's in black and white, from a favorable angle. It's reminiscent of perhaps James Dean. On social media, Ashley Rinsberg points out that the same photographer who created this photo, this attractive photo of Fuentes, is responsible for photos of RFK Jr., Eric Adams, Kash Patel, that all make them look weird, aloof, distant, confused, isolated. But not Fuentes for some reason. Why does the Times want him to look cool? Do they want him to be the next Charlie Kirk? Why would that be the case? Perhaps there's a lesson to be drawn there. And I encourage everyone to go on social media and look at it. We have a rights usage. We don't own the photo, so I can't show it here. But it's an astoundingly flattering photo of this man compared to all the other photos that this photographer, who does a specific black and white style, has done for Kash Patel and other people.
You pointed the article to my attention yesterday, and
Yeah.
thank you, because I was like, wow, this is interesting.
Yeah.
I really don't know that this should be a story about the photographer and how a photo makes a white nationalist look. I think the bigger issue is the real story that the audience and the political faction that's there for this person, Fuentes, that's gaining traction within what people are describing as the right party. I think that it's fine for Tucker Carlson to have an interview with him, because Tucker Carlson, you have to remember, February 2024 interviewed Vladimir Putin, like literally went over there, interviewed him, sat down against everyone's will, I think, for the most part.
Well,
and he still asked questions, and a lot of people and reports have proven many things that Putin told him just simply were propaganda that he didn't push back on. So this is not like some new trend he started with Fuentes. This is just when Putin goes into interviews that he knows might be contentious, he decidedly either pushes back when he thinks it's a comfortable situation or doesn't. And I think on foreign policy, it's one of those areas where he's happy to push back. So he's allowed to do whatever he wants as a freestanding, independent journalist, or however he wants to describe himself now, interviewer. But I think, Fuentes thrives on attention, right? He knows by saying things and coming at J.D. Vance's wife or for being an Indian woman, for saying racist statements, that attention will continue to come. And I think by places like the New York Times or Tucker Carlson having him there, and then people being enraged about him being himself, this is just the attention that he's asking for. So now we're just giving it to him.
Well, the New York Times is giving it to him. They are construing him as the leader of their opposition.
And I don't think they should take the bait either. They shouldn't take the bait either, is what I'm saying. I mean, this man is allowed to have an opinion. We are in an ecosystem of thoughts and opinions, whether right, wrong, racist, or otherwise. But people are really asking. I know he had a contentious relationship with Charlie Kirk, so I don't know that Charlie Kirk would approve him being his successor in any way. But I think that when people are looking for a new leader, sometimes they do go to the wrong person. And so if a large swath, and I don't follow Fuentes, I don't listen to anything he says. When people are racist, I clock him out. But when you're saying that he has this huge following and people are following him and he's growing within the party.
He has a growing following.
Okay, so if it's there, then it's there. So ask those people, why are you following this person? Does everything else get eradicated? Also, there's a lot of moral confusion. So if this conservative base and party is the party largely of the religious right and Christians, then why are the problematic statements that he says that are demeaning and racist, and why are those getting wiped away for some other ideologies that he might have?
Right.
Why is his following growing within that base?
Well,
to ask yourself and look internally for those
questions. I know why it's growing. It's growing because the establishment, conservative figures, conservative commentators have ignored a growing resentment toward endless military funding for Israel. They've ignored that issue. Fuentes is very vocal on that issue, and he is attracted to people to his side. In the same way that, for instance, during COVID, the left was very supportive of the lockdown measures and the mandates, even though many disaffected leftist people actually opposed that on civil liberties grounds. And so then the couple figures who spoke up and denounced, wait a minute, what about my body, my choice? What about that? I don't agree with this. Those people gained influence, and many of the institutional progressive figures lost influence. Now, that's done because now basically everyone admits we went way too far with COVID stuff. It's that phenomenon all over again, and I am warning conservative leaders to take it seriously and to recalibrate that aspect of the agenda if we want to discredit the other kooky stuff.
And there are a lot of people that are having that dialogue now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people were afraid to say anything about Benjamin Netanyahu without being labeled an anti-Semite. And that's what we're talking about, foreign relations.
Right.
We can go into detail about all the other ways that we're getting involved. But we can find common ground and find people to speak up that have large platforms that are not Fuentes, is all I'm saying. And so that person should not continue to be interviewed. There's a lot of people that Tucker Carlson has had on and should have on that, to me, don't include him.
I would have him on and interview him, but I would just grill him on, I wouldn't just be like, wow, you're so smart about this one thing. I'd be like, let's talk about the other things you think about.
Exactly. And we agree there. A big night for Democrats on Tuesday. We'll have your election recap coming right up. The results are in. A night of big wins for Democrats Tuesday as both New Jersey and Virginia elected a new governor. Take a look. Democrat Abigail Spanberger defeated Republican Winsome Earl Sears in Virginia, and Mikey Sherrill defeated Jack Citarelli in New Jersey.
Another key vote we were watching last night was California Prop 50. We'll take a closer look at that vote later on in the show, but the big news of the night, possibly the most watched race of the year. Zohran Mamdani won the New York City's mayor race handily, a little less than 9 points ahead of runner-up Andrew Cuomo. Here's Mamdani after the race was called.
My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change. A mandate for a new kind of politics. A mandate for a city we can afford. And a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that.
Now, that defeat of a political dynasty seemed to be a common theme among the left last night. New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had this to say following Mamdani's win.
We're not just tasked with defeating a Republican. They were also tasked with defeating the old guard of the Democratic Party that essentially led us to many of the perils of this moment. So he had a two-front war to win, which is what makes his victory so deeply impressive.
Not everyone is enthusiastic about this Democratic new guard, of course. CNN's Scott Jennings lamented Mamdani's win on air last night. Take a listen.
This is a terrible night for national Democratic image, given what is happening inside their party. Mamdani is an avowed socialist. It's not what people say that he is, it's what he says that he is. He's now the leader of their party. That's their energy, and Chuck Schumer's
He's the leader of the Democratic Party?
Let's swear.
There is no. Who is the leader? Can someone tell me?
As for that Democratic old guard, they at least seem to be supportive. Former President Obama offered his praise across the board, writing on X, "Congratulations to all the Democratic candidates who won tonight. It's a reminder that when we come together around strong, forward-looking leaders who care about the issues that matter, we can win. We've still got plenty of work to do, but the future looks a little bit brighter."
Well, good night for the Dems. Republicans got their clocks cleaned. Should qualify that by noting that these
clean. I haven't heard that one.
You haven't heard that one?
That's pretty funny.
In blue, these are blue states. Virginia, in particular, goes back and forth like crazy. It's unusual for the governor position to remain in the hands of the incumbent party. Winsome Earl Sears, the Republican in Virginia, had a lot going against her because, Virginia is a blue state and it's a state with a lot of government employees. The north part of Virginia, Washington, D.C. It's the suburbs of Washington, D.C., where a lot of federal employees live, is actually in Virginia. And so the shutdown, what's happening nationally, their frustration with Trump, I'm not sure how much that matters nationally. In Virginia, it certainly matters a great deal. So not at all surprises here go down. Jay Jones, the Attorney General, was a little bit of a major disappointment to Republicans that they couldn't keep the Republican Attorney General, Jason Mraz, in power, given that Jay Jones, the opponent, had been in that scandal where he said those really vile things about wanting children to die. His win was much narrower than Spanberger's, but he did win, and so I saw a lot of disappointment about that, and then also disappointment that they couldn't pick up the New Jersey governor seat, even though that one was pretty close last time. Wasn't even that close. So disappointments for the GOP, certainly.
I was looking at Winsome Earl Sears in this race because she's somebody who campaigned and has allied herself with President Trump in the past, and he didn't throw any support behind her in any way.
Well, no, she's a DeSantis person.
Well,
and he remembers that.
Well, that's what I mean. But that's still his candidate. Did Republicans want the overall?
He didn't do anything to help her.
He didn't help her in any way. I mean, not that.
He didn't want to associate with her.
Just because she thought DeSantis, who he also thought was a good person during the time of COVID. Now, obviously, when you challenge him, that changes. But
Yeah, he didn't do anything for her. I don't think he didn't think she could win, and she was not going to win. So it was a smart prediction on his part. The broader problem for Republicans, I think, that this shows, even though you didn't win Virginia, you didn't win New Jersey. Oh well, that's not some massive upset, really. It's just we got our expectations up. The problem for Republicans is, this is now a demonstrated phenomenon. Trump is a motivating factor for Republicans, low propensity Republicans to show up and vote. When Trump's on the ballot, the party does better. When Trump's not on the ballot, the party does a lot worse. And this is going to be a problem because Steve Bannon's fantasies aside, Trump is not going to be on the ballot ever again. And that is an issue Republicans are going to have to learn to deal with. How to motivate those more marginal voters Trump won the popular vote in the last election. Yep. Everybody votes. If everybody in America had voted, had been forced to vote, Trump's margin of victory probably would have been higher. That's according to expert analysis. When people turn out to vote, it helps Trump. But in an off-year election where Trump's not actually on the ballot, Democrats have a massive advantage. And of course, Trump will not be on the ballot again. So that is the major concern, major red flag for Republicans, in my view.
There were conversations a few years ago about a red wave, and people are now describing this as a blue tsunami. I think that people...
Tsunami?
Yeah, well, this actually happened. I think there was a dialogue about what happens.
What can blue do for you?
But I think this is people looked at this as what are the next steps for the Democratic Party, with a party that is always accused, and even by myself, of not having an exact direction. I think there's a real thing about, on the other hand of that coin, on the other side of that coin, of Trump fatigue. And so when he is in power, it does motivate people to vote. We can use New York as a specific example. They had the highest early in-person voter turnout of history of all time. They also had the highest turnout since 1969 for an election, for a mayoral election. So these are all numbers that we're seeing. We also know a youth vote hit a record of coming out, and they were involved and engaged in ways we haven't seen in a long time. And so if you're looking at New York and seeing what they're doing and always talking about how large swaths of both parties could do better with younger voters, you'll see, and I know that doesn't mean you care about the younger voters. I'm saying that parties do care. Well, AOC was right on point. She's saying, we are tired of the establishment candidates, and we are being loud and clear. As somebody who's propelling her career and considered a star within the Democratic Party, she's making a point by attaching herself so closely to Mamdani, who also shares a lot of her ideologies. And I think that it is a point. And Scott Jennings, he doesn't need to be the most concerned person up there. Democrats need to be more concerned than him to see if they want this to be the direction, and explain why, if not, they're not embracing it. Because Mamdani did win. I thought he was going to win by double digits. Obviously, he didn't. But because there's still enough people in New York and around the country that want a middle ground.
A win's a win. It was a comfortable win.
It was comfortable, but it wasn't.
Some people are like Bill Ackman and others who really wanted to defeat Mamdani are so mad that Sliwa wouldn't get out of the race and make it, clear the path for Cuomo. If every Sliwa voter had voted for Cuomo, it's not even. It wouldn't have been enough.
And some people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I'm going to talk about soon in my lens, said that as if she was a New Yorker, she would not vote for Cuomo. She said as a woman, and to see those accusations that were lobbied against him, she wouldn't feel comfortable going to a voting booth. As somebody who had so many discrepancies with how COVID was handled by a lot of Democrats, how can you go in there and tell somebody to vote for Cuomo? You're asking people to go against some really key issues for them that were Republicans, and you're not going to see all 8% or whatever he ended up with go to Cuomo anyway. So they just needed to drop that idea anyway and come forward with policies. That was the biggest thing. People might not like Mamdani's policies. He came forward with them.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say, because we gotta go. I don't usually watch cable news anymore. I see the clips as they make their way onto social media, but I don't turn the TV on and actually have on MSNBC or CNN. But it was election night, so I did last night. Watched a lot of CNN and MSNBC. CNN's coverage was excellent. I thought it was fantastic.
Wow.
MSNBC's was unwatchable, and they were just so obsessed with the idea that it's the East Wing demolition, which is what motivated everyone to come out and vote for Democrats.
Hey, even I had many lenses about that.
Do not think that will stop a voter's mind. I don't think they even are aware it is going on to a great extent. But still ahead, Sean Duffy sounding the alarm as the government shutdown stretches into the longest in history. His warning for lawmakers next.
The federal government shutdown is now officially the longest shutdown in history, now in its 36th day.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy delivered a warning to Democrats in Congress that if the shutdown continues into next week, there may be more severe consequences.
If you bring us to a week from today, Democrats, you will see mass chaos, you will see mass flight delays, you'll see mass cancellations, and you may see us close certain parts of the airspace because we just cannot manage it because we don't have the air traffic controllers.
Right now, about 13,000 air traffic controllers are working without pay, and nearly 50% of major control facilities are facing staffing shortages. Now, on Friday, 80% of the New York area staff had called out.
Now, despite the warnings from Duffy, liberals in Congress are pushing Democrats to hold the line. CNN reports that roughly a dozen Senate Democrats have signaled that they are willing to support a stopgap bill in exchange for a future vote on health care. But some on the left are urging those Democrats not to cave. Bernie Sanders told CNN, quote, "If the Democrats cave on this, I think it would be a betrayal to millions and millions of working families who want them to stand up and protect their health care benefits." And Senator Chris Murphy backed him up, saying, quote, "I think we're suckers to believe that a party that is opposed to extending the subsidies now is all of a sudden going to be supportive of that a month from now."
Well, I don't know what else they want. They don't have the power to enact these healthcare changes. What they need to do is vote to end the shutdown in exchange, yes, for a vote later, maybe a symbolic vote, whatever, on the healthcare policy they want. We'll work on healthcare later, but this is getting ridiculous. The American people are going to suffer because of this. With holiday travel plans disrupted, holidays coming up, it's time to vote to end the shutdown. And I predict the Democrats will. I think they'll do the right thing and will fall in line and do that.
Now, we've seen thousands of government workers be affected from air traffic controllers. The popular story that blew up of the one that had to work for DoorDash, and DoorDash jumped in and gave him some money to help him out in the interim. We know that government employees are affected. When you start to affect everyday Americans with things like you said, holiday travel, which may be a huge inconvenience as people go see their loved ones on the time they've already scheduled off that they may or may not be getting paid. This is when everyday people who are not attached to DC in the same ways that federal employees are going to get really annoyed and stressed out because they have to move and shake a lot of things in order to get comfortable in life. So I think that both parties are going to have to look at this and figure out what the next steps forward is. I've been clear that I don't think the government shutdown is a great idea. Whenever a shutdown happens in the government, either side does it, that it's a failure of Congress to do its job, and people on both sides of the aisle have been critical of Congress for doing that. But if I were to explain and say why Democrats continue to hold the line, it's because they understand that simultaneously, as we talk about what's happening right now with SNAP benefits being cut and with possible delays in flights, we are going to have a conversation in a few months where people actually can't afford health care anymore. And they look at people's premiums going from $800 to $1,900, according to KFF study, which is an independent policy research company. And they're looking at these numbers, and we're literally in the middle of open enrollment, and people are saying, well, I can't afford that. So then how do I keep health insurance for my family? It's a broken system. And there's a lot of people, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I'll talk about in my lens, going on and on different programs saying, yes, we didn't like Obamacare. That's fine. It's been instituted for like a decade now. So what's the plan forward? Because she's not hearing Mike Johnson or anybody come to the table and say, we'll talk about healthcare in these ways. Be transparent with the American public. If we could see what the conversations are, perhaps people won't be getting so riled up about their Republicans doing nothing and Democrats just simply holding the line to hold the line. What are the dialogues being happening here? What are the conversations happening? I think both sides of the aisle need to really say that, because people are naturally already don't like Congress, and this is just really exaggerating that feeling.
Yeah, and the system needs reform. I agree with that, but we just can't let the government remain shut down any longer in the interim. We gotta start paying the air traffic controllers. We gotta get people their SNAP benefits that they're expecting. This is not a way to do policy, is in this kind of like hostage taking experience. So,
and nobody would not work for now a month more, 36 days and not get paid. I don't know one person that would say, okay, no problem.
I would not.
Yeah, I don't know how. So that's kind of a lot to ask for people that have nothing to do with this back and forth. Next on Rising, Marjorie Taylor Greene appeared on The View yesterday. I'll be talking about that conversation in my lens.
Welcome back to Rising. Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Let's get to it. So when Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene showed up on The View, it wasn't the viral chaos that some expected. It was something better, a real conversation. Now, let's be clear. Greene has built her brand as one of the loudest MAGA voices in Congress. But lately, she's been doing something rare in Washington, turning her megaphone back on her own party. Now, during a recent government shutdown fight, she took aim squarely at Republicans, saying that many Americans, even those outside her base, have been thinking for years. Take a look.
Healthcare costs have risen and risen and risen and risen. But I'm going to pick on Republicans. Republicans never fixed it. And then the ACA tax credits were passed in 2021, and there was a sunset date of the end of this year. And Republicans never made a plan for that. And I yelled at Mike Johnson last week on our GOP conference call.
Now, Greene didn't stop there. She kept pressing, not for more rhetoric, but for more policy.
I hope that Mike Johnson is finally giving a single health care policy because the country deserves it, and it shouldn't be a secret. And I shouldn't have to go into a skiff to go find our Republican health insurance plan.
Maybe
Honestly,
there is no plan.
You know what? You want to know something? That, I believe, is the truth. There's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of bills, but there's no consensus. And I think that's a failure.
Whether you agree with her politics or not, Greene is doing something we don't see enough in D.C., calling out her own team. She's criticized the Trump administration's military actions in Iran, labeled Israel's war in Gaza a genocide, and demanded transparency in the Epstein investigation, even when it made Republican leaders uncomfortable. Reportedly, Trump himself has asked senior GOP members what's going on with Marjorie. Maybe what's going on is that she's finally realizing that what many Americans know. The problems that divide us aren't always about left or right. Sometimes they're about accountability. Now, Green noted that she appreciated the conversation between her and the other 5 hosts, and it had been, quote, professional and kind, and thinks more calm discourse needs to happen nationwide. Now, no matter where you stand politically, this kind of honest, across the aisle conversation is what the country's been starving for. And if Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, can sit across from the View table and admit her own side's failures and defend things she believes in as well, like immigration reform, then maybe, just maybe, there's hope that more people in Washington will start telling the truth too and get back to work.
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting interview that she did on The View. I'm glad she is perfectly comfortable talking to people that she doesn't maybe agree with all the time or would have even been hostile in the past. And the ladies of The View were perfectly respectful of her. Now maybe it's easy for them to be respectful when she's mostly saying things that are critical of Republicans, but it was a worthwhile conversation. And I've said many times I like and agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene's independent streak, hers and Massey's and others. I don't quite see it the same way she does on every single one of these issues. I do on most of them. I agree with her on Epstein, although we have some differences. I agree with her on foreign policy, Iran, Israel, etc. And I agree that Republicans have had all the time in the world to come up with a better health care plan, and they didn't. They haven't prioritized this, and that goes to the Speaker. I don't think his answers on this have been particularly persuasive. So good for her, and I hope she continues to have conversations with everybody. I've never met her in person. We've interviewed her on Rising once or twice, and she was very gracious, I think, even from the perspective of the person sitting in the liberal chair. She seems like a warm and open-minded person, and I appreciate having someone like that in Congress.
I wanted to ask you what you thought about something else she said on the show. I didn't want to play the whole show, but she talked about how she thinks that there are paid influencers in the MAGA base that are paid to basically just do whatever the MAGA base is asking. So she felt like she got attacked specifically by paid influencers just for saying she's going on The View or just for criticizing lately. And she said that I know a lot of people were sharing and retweeting that, like, wow, you think people are getting paid to do this? But the way you describe it, and you're more active on social media than I am, is that this infighting is allowed. We fight in public, where Democrats maybe sweep it under the rug and fight. Like with Kamala, you see the book come out, and then they talk about the fighting, but they pretend like it didn't happen in real time. So break that down for me about if there's a real drama.
The influencing thing is very complicated. Actually, Kamala's a good example because there was a lot of trending Kamala back when she became the candidate. Remember Brat Kamala?
Yeah, Brat the Green.
But that was
well, that was a Charlie XCX song, so it actually
fine. But we learned that this was heavily manufactured, and the Democratic elites had paid influencers to kind of manifest this on social media. So that was a thing. In terms of, look, I was always inclined to dismiss this accusation that the people speaking out against, that's an easy thing to say. No, there's no one who's really against me. The people against me, they're being bought off by my enemies. It's not real. I think that's a conspiratorial way of thinking, or no, probably if you're being criticized, it's because people disagree with you. And the most, the years of Russian influence, accusations that Russia was buying influence on social media. Remember, that was a claim that consumed the mainstream media for 2 or 3 years. And subsequently, we learned that the extent of that influencing, I'm not saying it didn't happen at all, was much less than had been presumed, or its impact was much less. Now, I don't know. There's been all these accounts on X. There's all these America First accounts saying, stand up if you're a real American. Real Americans believe this, and then you find out it's some Indian guy in India or in Pakistan or.
I saw two of the same exact. Are they called tweets still, like in a row from 2 different accounts with 2 different faces yesterday? And I was like, Colin. Because I was like, maybe MTG's doesn't like people criticizing her, but I was like, wait, underneath that exact post, I'm like, wait, somebody said the same thing with the same laughing, crying emoji in the same exact text. I don't know. I mean, maybe.
Well, my bottom line is I don't know either. You hear accusations of various Middle Eastern governments paying for influence, Indians, the Chinese, the Russians. I don't know. All I can tell you, the viewing public, is no one is paying me to say what I'm saying except the Nexstar Corporation that owns this show.
But they're not telling you what to say.
That's the God's honest truth.
But so also in that interview, I noticed that she didn't. So she made sure not to come at President Trump. She was like, "That's still my friend." And he's like, "But he might not." Joy Behar, who's being funny, is like, "He might not love you back right now." She's like, "That's okay. He yells at everyone. I campaigned for him. I believe in what he's doing with immigration." But she drew the line at every other congressional male Republican, and she was very direct and defiant about she said basically, and I hope I can say this is a pissing contest between men in Congress, and she was saying why women should be the example at the table to show people how to have civilized discourse and move forward in some of these issues. She said she yelled at Mike Johnson, he's not doing enough, and so she was just basically taking a broad stroke brush and saying all men on the Republican side in Congress need to do better. And so what's your response kind of to that part of the conversation, that she was very, I know you don't like Congress in general as a whole, but she was very much targeting the men.
I don't like women saying it's all men's fault.
Well,
that's really don't appreciate that.
Well, that's what she said. I'm literally not misquoting her. She was very adamant at the table and saying, see, we're the example.
Well, some of the ladies of Congress have not exactly acquitted themselves, and I don't mean that in a partisan way, but the screeching of Nancy Mace and Jasmine Crockett and a bunch of very attention-seeking, performative people in both parties. But I am pleased to say that Marjorie Taylor Greene is not remotely one of them, and seems to be a serious thinker who cares about policy and ideas, and that's a good thing.
And you know what? Speaking of bringing people's past interviews up, the View table did a good job. Whoopi Goldberg, Sunny Hostin, asking her questions about some of the conspiracy theories she platformed, and she actually admitted that she was caught in a deep dive on social media and online of conspiracy theories, and kind of she's like, I'm just like you. You guys don't know me that well, and you read clips that are taken out of context in my mind, and then judge me based off that. I went into some deep conspiracy theories, and I just realized I was wrong. Do you accept that, or do you think by the time you make it to Congress that somebody should be pretty much organizing their thought enough not to fall for a conspiracy theory?
I don't know. The perfect is the enemy of the good. And also, well, everyone got bamboozled by certain conspiracy theories. And in certain people got bamboozled by thinking things were conspiracy theories, again, to go back to COVID, as I always do. And then it turned out they were not conspiracy theories, like the idea that it, came from a lab initially, like the idea that the vaccine was not going to eradicate spread of the disease, although you said you're a crazy person for thinking those things, and then both those things turned, the vaccine certainly does not eradicate the spread of COVID because we have widespread vaccination, we still have COVID, and it is certainly not proven, but it is the contention of the Energy Department, the CIA, and the FBI that it all came from a lab. So
I'm sure we're going to hear more from MTG in the next few days.
Coming up, California voters approved the state's redistricting initiative. We'll discuss what that means for next year's midterm elections. Stay with us.
More results to discuss from election night. California voters approved a ballot measure known as Prop 50 that will set new congressional boundaries in the state.
Now, the voting result is being considered a victory for Democrats, as it's estimated that the party could gain up to 5 seats in the House in next year's midterms. Voters passed the measure overwhelmingly, with more than 63% voting yes as of this morning. The proposition will allow the state to bypass its independent redistricting commission for 2026 in favor of the new, more Democrat-friendly map.
Now, California is of course, the nation's most populous state with 52 representatives in the House. This ballot measure comes after the second biggest state, Texas, passed its own measure in August.
The new map in Texas, which was strongly urged on by President Trump, is expected to give the Republican Party a similar advantage in the midterms. But Trump expressed outrage over California's Prop 50, writing on Truth Social, the unconstitutional redistricting vote in California is a giant scam in that the entire process, in particular the voting itself, is rigged. All mail-in ballots where the Republicans in the state are shut out is under very serious legal and criminal review. Stay tuned. And conservative commentator Colin Rugg accused the voters of hypocrisy, writing on X, despite passing Prop 50, which just stripped power from California's nonpartisan commission, 92% of California voters say that district lines should be drawn by a nonpartisan commission. Are people really this stupid?
But California Governor Gavin Newsom says last night's victory sends a strong message from the state of California. Here he was speaking after the proposition was passed.
Instead of agonizing over the state of our nation, we organized in an unprecedented way in a 90-day sprint people from all over the United States of America contributed their voices and their support for this initiative. We stood tall and we stood firm in response to Donald Trump's recklessness. And tonight, after poking the bear, this bear roared.
Clever. I mean, redistricting and gerrymandering didn't start with Texas. It doesn't end with California. This is not a good ideal move for either party to continue on. I think we should look at the census and figuring out ways to get that as accurate as possible, which helps us decide when redistricting is necessary. Gavin Newsom is obviously campaigning to run for president and is a direct response, as he says it, to Texas by doing this, which does kind of balance out the amount of people or seats that are acquired by both parties. And so he is doing something about it. And what Democrats have called major Democrats to do is do something, not just sit back. And if they complain so much about President Trump taking this office again, what is going to be the response? And he's been the person most vocal, I would say, about his response. And so whether you like it or not, he's, again, doing something.
Yeah, while I don't think partisan gerrymandering and redistricting are good ideas, as you note, you can't really claim in this case, in fairness to the Democrats, that they started it. What kicked off this most recent flurry of redistricting efforts was what Texas is going to do. So if Texas is going to do it, then California can do it to just mitigate the effects of Texas. I think the better idea would be for both states to just not even bother, because can't we just do mutually assured destruction and stand down here? Now, Texas did not, Republicans did not, first time ever redistricting. Illinois is horrifically gerrymandered. So is, I believe, Massachusetts. So a number of states. Both parties have an incentive to maximize their advantage in states they control. The result for the American people is catastrophic, because the parties have a mutual interest in making the districts maximally safe, and so that they're not so that you have districts where Republicans are going to win anyway, Democrats going to win anyway, and they can agree. They're like, well, in that district, the Democrat wins. In that district, the Republican wins. In that's safe for us. That's safe for you. We all agree. We all shake hands on that. The American people lose because then they don't have competitive elections. And in fact, you're more likely to get extremists in both parties elected to Congress, because even though the median voter is somewhere in the middle, if you've carved it so that all the Republicans are in one district and all the Democrats are in the other, you've made it so you're going to get a very liberal Democrat and a very conservative Republican, whereas if it was more evenly split district, then you get someone in the middle. I think it's not good for democracy, for civility, for the tone of our politics, but also Republicans will say this, and I agree with them, nonpartisan redistricting committee. The word nonpartisan XYZ, I always go, is it really nonpartisan? What does that mean?
But they have an independent commission in California.
Who decides?
But I think the difference between, let's say, what Texas is doing and what Gavin Newsom pushed forward with Prop 50 is that they did include people. They allowed them to vote on it. If they would have voted no, it wouldn't have happened. And he said, I'm leaving it up to the people. I present this to you. Would you like to redistrict? And even though I don't think that it's the best idea to keep going back and forth between states.
They asked a majority Democratic state.
They still asked.
Would you like to eke out more Democratic representation in Congress?
But they still asked.
Surprise, surprise. The people said, yes.
Okay, so if you put it forward, if Texas does the same thing, then they can just figure that out in the same way. I think at the very least, he's like, I'm giving it to the people of California. And if the people of California felt like you and I, they could say, no, we think we should stay as is. We already have the majority. We're already a Democratic state. What are we doing? I think. But if we step back and talk about this whole lead-in that we got to this point about the wins last night, you brought up earlier that if President Trump was on the ballot, perhaps Republicans would do better. I actually think the exact opposites. I think that Democrats poured millions of dollars into ads connecting a lot of the Republican candidates, whether they wanted to be or not, to President Trump. And all these wins were a direct response to this Trump fatigue that happens when people are just exhausted already of 9 months of just a lot of what feels like chaos. And people are responding to that. You know that there's a higher turnout when Trump is in office by Democrats and by independents. There's just a
higher turnout by Republicans too.
when he's on the ballot, though.
Right.
So if he's not, then the question becomes what is the party's next plan? Because J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, they're still not President Trump, right? President Trump is this anomaly of a figure that's moving forward. And we talk about the future of the elections, specifically looking at the midterms. It's kind of like, well, what's the messaging for Republicans? Because as they continue to infight, we just did a segment about Marjorie Taylor Greene. You you did your radar several times about what's happening with Fuentes and people trying to connect him to Charlie Kirk and what the problematic issues with that would be. What does the party look like moving forward, as Democrats have the same issue to decide? We always pick on them and say that they're lost, and I'm one of the people that say that after Kamala's lost, but it seems like Republicans have a lot of work to do without Trump at the helm of the party. Yeah,
that's absolutely fair. I've mentioned that earlier in the show. It's always going to be rough for the. This is an off-year election. Mostly what happened took place in blue states, so we don't have to succumb to any kind of fatalism. We'll see. The midterms will tell us a lot next year. If Democrats retake the House, that will say something, because again, Trump won't explicitly be on the ballot, although it will be to some degree a referendum on his performance. I mean, he's unpopular right now. His poll numbers have come down. His unfavorabilities are very high. What he's doing with respect to tariffs in particular is not popular and is having effects on the prices of things that is tanking the agenda, in my view. I really wish he would give up that fight and concentrate on the other aspects of his agenda, even ones I don't agree with, like on some of the immigration stuff that is popular. But I think it's the economic thing. I mean, it's the economy, stupid. We know that. That's the lesson over and over again. People revolted against Biden because of high prices, because of inflation that was downstream of COVID-era spending. We were going to get that under control, I thought. The problem is the tariffs. It's hurting prices, and you got to fix that policy. And then I think Republicans might be looking at something different, because in these races, that's a top concern. In Virginia, in New Jersey, in New York, ask people what's their number one issue. It's not the East Wing demolition. They didn't even know about that. It's the prices. It's inflation. And Republicans promised to do something about that. Not enough has been done yet. And something they consciously chose, a fight they chose, in my view, tariffs.
And we can look at what Mamdani does in New York. And if he handles it and gets it under control, it's not going to really look great for President Trump and his agenda.
No way that...
You don't know what's going to happen. It'll be interesting to watch this test case of somebody.
Well, what I expect to happen is he will fail to implement his socialist policies and things will mostly be fine.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Stephen Colbert is speaking out after his late night show was canceled by CBS. We'll be right back after this.
Late night host Stephen Colbert sat down with GQ for an interview recently.
At the ritzy Chateau Marmont Hotel, he discussed CBS canceling his show and also said that he was actually more conservative than people think. Let's watch.
Do you think, people perceive me as this sort of lefty figure? I think I'm more conservative than people think. I just happen to be talking about a government in extremis.
Yeah.
And so what I'm giving you is my reaction video to the day. and my reaction video is like the Scream.
Yeah.
In a way. but with jokes.
Well, with jokes, yeah.
And so that makes me perceives me as more left necessarily than I am.
Colbert also spoke about being laid off. He said that he thinks the company settling a lawsuit with Trump was damaging to the company's reputation. Here he is.
I'm not going to say who made that decision, because I don't know. No one's ever going to tell us. Decided to cut a check for $16 million to the President of the United States over a lawsuit that their own lawyers, Paramount's own lawyers, said is completely without merit. So it is unclear to me why anyone would do that other than to curry favor with a single individual. And so if people have theories that associate me with that, it's a reasonable thing to think.
Back in July, when we found out Colbert was getting laid off, President Trump wrote on Truth Social, "I absolutely love that Colbert got fired. His talent was even less than his ratings."
Trump loves some late night TV hosts.
I know.
Coming at them.
This mode of television is just going away. Young people don't get their news this way. I've said this a million times. I don't think the decision to can him was made to curry favor with Trump. It might very well be that the lawsuit was settled for that reason, because the federal government has oversight over mergers and acquisitions that I would rather it didn't. But if that's the system, that's the way it's going to be. Colbert, now that's interesting, him saying that he's more conservative than he comes across. But what does that mean? It's your show. So are you representing yourself in some inauthentic way? You have things to say, you have maybe criticisms of the left or of Democrats that would register with conservative audiences. Well, why aren't you raising them? It's your show. So the way you're being perceived is completely on you. No one's making you do that. And then he's saying, What I gather he means by that, I'm just guessing, is that he's a little bit more conservative. People think in the same way that, last night on MSNBC, Nicole Wallace is maybe even thinks of herself as a conservative because she comes from the Republican Party. But she's never Trump. She's if you're
but
not
she's
with
literally
Trump
worked for the Bush
anymore,
administration, so that doesn't make you not
that
conservative.
Was 8,000 years ago.
But it was still in recent memory of what the Conservative Party used to be. So that's the exact point. Like Trump is an anomaly within the Conservative Party, something that in the last 2 terms that he had as presidency,
changed the party, and it's his party now.
Fine, but after he leaves, it could go any way, like we just discussed.
It could change again.
And so therefore, the people who had a home within a party shouldn't just disperse because somebody with new ideas came in. That's the whole thing. It's like how to include them, or they should change parties, like we see in the Democratic Party. Karine Jean-Pierre wants to leave, okay, be an independent. Or people can decide what they want to do. People are allowed to move around, but they should not have to be feeling isolated just because a new leader comes in, especially if for years prior to President Trump, there were specific things like fiscal responsibility that were at the top of the agenda for Republicans that President Trump has changed.
How much you like Trump.
Yes, but it's going to change after Trump is gone. So my point is that what Colbert is talking about, let me finish. What Colbert is talking about is that when he goes on television and responds to an anomaly, somebody who constantly says off-the-wall things that are not subscribing to any regular traditional president that we've seen that follows any particular decorum, that he's responding to the news of the day. And sometimes it is wild, okay? The president goes up there, you're like, I don't mind to love everything he says. I'm just saying some of the things that he implements I like. He is somebody that we've never seen before, a figure that we've never seen before. And Colbert is just responding to be timely to things that happened that day.
I will never forget, he had Jon Stewart on middle of COVID, and Jon Stewart started talking about how he absolutely thinks COVID was caused by scientific research in an unsafe lab, and Colbert just watches him with horror and jokes that we're going to have to stop recording, which is, he's to me a representation of a establishment liberal, maybe not far left in any way, but just liberal establishment mainstream consensus that is, you might not think of it as antithetical to political conservatism. I would argue it is in some ways conservative in just a reactionary kind of reaction to anything new or different or extreme, but it doesn't really have any currency on the right.
Well, I think Colbert will be fine because I like my next guest with David Letterman on Netflix better than I liked The Late Show. I know I'm in my own bucket with that, but it's a really good documentary style show. That does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive content on YouTube coming your way today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those who like to listen on the go, we're now available wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow.